Now, I'm not new to Asym games, and they honestly take up a fair chunk of my time. When I'm not raging at a Roblox tower defense game or busy building maps, I'm playing the newest Asym, or just classic Dead by Daylight, and having fun being a fat chud just slugging an entire lobby as a glitch trap. So, what is an Asym game? Asymmetrical horror is a multiplayer subgenre of horror games that features an uneven balance between competing teams, typically consisting of survivors and killers. Typically being 1v8 or 1v4, and in Dead by Daylight's case, it would be 1v4 and 2v8. So let's take a quick dive in how they work, not only from a balance perspective, but from the players and even the developers. Welcome to Codex. I'm Gray. When most people think of an Asym game, they see Dead by Daylight, Forsaken, or even newer, Bite by Night. And on a deeper concept, when they think of the games themselves, most people see the survivors or the killers themselves, but never the way the game works and why it works. Some of the best asymmetrical horror games have been built around the idea of escape and a balance between what each party needs to do to reach its win state. Typically being multiple ways, it could just be to kill all survivors or a majority, and the survivor side being complete all objectives and escape, or if it's the last survivor, make it to the second escape type. And in Dead by Daylight, it's the exit doors and the hatch, whereas in Bite by Night, it's the exit doors, and rather than needing to complete the objectives, you could just wait for the game to be finished. It would take forever, but still a good point to make. Having a variety in the way it's completed adds depth and a fresh way for it to keep balance. And that brings us to the structure of a good Asym game's looks, and how it handles keeping something looking nice without ruining the gameplay loop. Overall, any good Asym map requires a depth to it. My personal formula for a successful Asym game is 2 constants and 7 areas that can be changed to keep it new or different. Kinda like if it were procedurally generated, without having to worry about the flaws of procedural generation. Be it a different layout of tiles in Dead by Daylight where the objectives are in different spots, or the chance that one of the constants is in a slightly different place, it feels like a new map to learn each time, even if in its essence it is the same. My favorite example is the swamp map in Dead by Daylight, having 2 entirely different variations to the main landmark, being whether or not the ship spawns or if it's the large shack. 2 different experiences in just one map, all the while having at least 8 tiles that are slightly different or somewhat similar throughout. It becomes incredibly important to remember and rely on what you see and learn when playing. If you can manage that balance while looking as good as it is, you might just have the next best Asym game on your hands. Another good field to play is a popular theme or an idea, a concept even. Just a feeling that you get when playing. Dead by Daylight isn't exactly scary. It does have its moment of adrenaline, but it's quite the bright game, even if it does have dark topics. Whether your game fills with themes of Five Nights at Freddy's, for example, or just a reference to an older slasher film, these unique and different icons are what your audience will grasp onto. Bite by Night is popular due to its refined feel, its completeness from the get-go, and let's be honest, FNAF carries it. Any game is only as good as its source material, of course, and its lighting, if I'm honest. Having FNAF as a backboard gives ideas for killers, survivors, and skins, and even a good idea of a moveset. Not to say making something original isn't good, it's just harder. Dead by Daylight gets by with its original killers, but when they added Springtrap alone, they spiked in new players and even returning ones for months, still holding up fairly well now. If you can effectively, and more importantly, legally, add a survivor or killer, or some sort of reference even, be it skins to an existing character, it elevates the whole experience. A whole new refined feel with just the right amount of effort really sells how fun and engaging an experience can be. Now, if we circle back onto the field of map generation, it's good to keep in mind that there needs to be a balance in chase, escape, and how fun it is to do either, be it escaping or looping a killer in just about any Asym game, to just chasing the survivor. You don't want to have to worry about your players getting exhausted at the content, and it's best to keep the value of what might induce rage or quitting to a minimum. I feel that might be a given, of course, but some people manage to forget that. Now, Another good thing to keep in mind is the way you structure a map. So, if we take Forsaken as an example, you'll have two very distinct types of maps. You'll have maps that are entirely flat, or you'll have maps with a fair bit of elevation. Now, if a map has a very good amount of elevation, it's almost entirely plausible that the survivors will win every time. But if you take the shopping mall or like the park map or even the space map from Forsaken, it's very killer-sided and it's kind of hard to find a game where the killer doesn't win by some sort of default. It just feels that they don't structure themselves on balance well enough when it comes to their map generation. It looks nice sometimes, not all their maps look good, and some of the newer ones have looked fine. And they do update them sometimes, but overall, it just needs a lot more balance. If we take Dead by Daylight as a good example, every map either has a fair bit of elevation or it's small enough that the elevation doesn't matter. If your map's too wide and straight out and you don't have any elevation, it's kind of hard to escape. Another thing you got to keep in mind is whenever you do just have a straight run, you should have points where the survivors can make their escape if they have the skill to do so. You don't want your game to be too easy, but you also don't want it to be frustrating to play. Now, I could continue this discussion in another video, as honestly I could talk about this theory for hours, but I'm going to go ahead and move on. Should something new come to the field, it's always a good idea to resurface on older balancing. Could be a new tech, new item, new survivor, anything that would change the way it's played. I've seen multiple cases where it took way too long to something being meta before the issue was fixed. A meta shouldn't exist in a perfect world. There will always be a shortcoming that leads to one, and no balancing is always going to catch everything. Just make sure it's fun to play. Now, that goes without saying, but if your game has an overbearing amount of stun, the killer's not going to want to play the game. But if your game doesn't have enough survivor-sided, fight, then it's not going to be fun for the survivors to play. So you need to find either a balance in the way your teams are structured and maybe even limit the classes that you can have. So you don't want it to be where every survivor can play fighter in Fight by Night, but you also don't want it to be where not enough people can play fighter. If we manage to create a strategic balance between at least 4 players being able to, if we're going with an A team like in Fight by Night, then it would make more sense. Or you use a perk system where you can have a class and a survivor that does specific things, but the perk build changes the way that it's played. So say you have a fighter in Fight by Night, but perks that the fighter has to unlock that makes it so the stun is higher, and another survivor might use different perks so that it does do the same stun, but the goal is to make the killer disoriented and turned around instead of just stopping them in their tracks. You can keep that balance and you'd be set. It is really hard to balance. That's the problem. If you do it this way, there will be a meta, and that's something that you can't avoid all the time. I'd like to say that Dead by Daylight doesn't have a meta, but it clearly has 4 perks that almost everyone will always be using. See the vaults, get some sort of insight on the killer, cancel out the stun so you can sit in the exit gate, flashing the killer and not leaving, and then dying anyways because you should have just left. Now, I honestly cannot think of a better way to end the video, and this is rather abrupt, but it's also my first time writing a script. It ain't so bad. I mean, I might continue to do it going forward. It's a lot less editing down the road, at least, and a whole lot of, So, if y'all enjoy this kind of content, or just enjoy hearing me speak, please like, comment, and subscribe, and I have a goal of 2,000 subscribers I'd like to hit before the next year. Thank you all so much for watching to the end, especially the end, and have a good night, y'all. I'm Gray, and let me know if you want more of this content. So you can tell when I went off script, I immediately changed my character. Now, night, y'all.